Hey everybody, so we're going to pick up with lecture 2 in chapter 5 of the JavaScript book, working with the DOM. In video 1, we talked about different ways to access elements, get element by ID, get element by class, get element by element name, or get element by name, all these different methods. But this one's where we start making things actually dynamic. The first part of JavaScript is to select something, to target something in your HTML. And once you have something targeted, then you can change it. And so that's why I like this portion of the lecture a little bit better, because we're not just talking how do you select things, but once we've selected things, we can make changes to them and start seeing changes to our HTML. We can start making dynamic HTML. And so in this lecture, we're going to talk about adding and removing nodes. We're going to actually cause browsers windows to pop up. We're going to cause pop-ups and close those pop-ups. And then we're going to start getting our JavaScript to run on timers. And so maybe you want something to run every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds for so long, and then you want your JavaScript to stop. Well, you can set timers and you can set intervals and things like that. Now we're going to save the last video, video 3, to talking about these history, location, navigation, and screen objects. So if I fast forward to slide 30, where we left off after video 1, we talk about creating new elements to put in our HTML. And the way you do that is with document.createElement. Now, of course, inside of these quotes here, you just don't put the word element. You put the tag that you need to create. This is an example of creating a div. Now, if it was just that simple, that'd be nice. But once we've created an element, we have to put it somewhere in the DOM. Right? So there's really 2 methods that are important when we talk about creating an element. Okay, we've created an element, but where do we put it in our document? Right? In the hierarchy, where do we put it? And one way of telling it where to go is by having a parent node, and we'll take a look at some of my code that I wrote this time, so to avoid errors. Some people like that I did it differently this time. Some people didn't. We'll see how it goes. We have to target a parent node, and we have to append child, and then specify which node we want to attach. So let's go ahead and open up this is the same template from yesterday. And if we kind of scroll down, I wrote a bunch of functions in order of the lecture. So the first function is called add me. And you can see here we have a variable, and it's just called me. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a picture of myself. So the idea here is we're going to click on a button, or we're going to type in a text box. We're going to create some event. And when that event occurs, it's going to insert a picture of myself. Right? So the way we go about doing that is we have to create an element that is an image in our function. And from yesterday, we learned that once we have an element, we can modify any of its attributes through the dot notation. So I create a variable. Now notice I make this variable global so that I can access this variable me inside of multiple functions. So I got this other function down here we'll talk about in a little bit. But that's why I make me global, so that I can access it in multiple functions. Well, I changed the source of me to be this picture of, well, it's me and my girlfriend.
Oh, she's cute.
Thanks.
Why is she with you?
That's fun. I hope they didn't hear that on the recording. That was very rude. My class is something else. I forgive all my future classes. Or forgive me. Forgive my current class. So I changed the source attribute, and then I have another parent, which I have an ID of add here. So if I look for that ID of add here, I can do a control F for add here. Notice I just added a paragraph at the end of my document, pretty much at the bottom. I just added a paragraph, and then to that paragraph, I'm going to append a child. And that child is going to be an image. And so again, what do? We create an element. We can modify that element's attributes or its content. And then we append child to, you essentially you target a parent, you append a child to that parent, and then what goes in the parentheses is the element that you've created. As I launch the browser here, a bunch of different buttons, I've changed their text. But I can go down to the add me function. Now, I didn't show you all this jazz. These are our event listeners. The very first event listener uses a query selector. So this is a CSS selector, right? We're selecting the input element under the ID of foot 2, which happens to be, if I look for foot 2, again, if I look for foot 2, here's my footer. It's the button that says add me. We're targeting this button that says add me, and we're adding an event listener. When you click it, it calls the add me function. The add me function is the function that we just looked at. So again, I go down here. The whole idea is you click it, and it puts the picture in the paragraph. Now, if you inspect, here you see my paragraph, right? Here's the paragraph, and there's the image. You can actually see it inserted HTML on a button click. And that's the gist of it. Two parts. And I'll go back to the PowerPoint. The first part, create an element. The second part is append child. Now, this demonstration, what they did, is a little bit more complex. I started mine off a little bit more simple. You know, here they created 2 elements in the demonstration, a figure and an image. Then they appended the image as a child to the figure, and then they appended the figure as a child to the article.
Which is the parent, right?
Right. The article is the parent of figure. The figure is the parent of image.
Okay.
So again, so you append the child of the image tag to the figure. You then append the figure to the article, and that's the book demonstration. Okay, but for the first thing they had to do is they had to create the figure and create the image using create element, right? Create element first, append child second. Seth?
So I'm assuming that's a temporary edition. Once you refresh the browser, it's like that would go away.
Yes, that is a temporary edition. Once you refresh the browser, it goes away.
So to do a permanent edition, that would be like probably a server-side language.
Well,
Like we change it profile, like you're doing stuff to.
keep in mind, permanent, you know, we're talking static versus dynamic. So when you're working dynamic, you could take anything away and add it. Now, you know, if you wanted to be there every single time, well, then you code it in the markup, right?
So you could make a.
Or if you want it there every single time, don't put it in an event handler. Just put it in a script and have the script put it there.
So like, let's say you're like you know how some websites are like have you customize it, and you can change like a color or a picture or a head, like change like especially social media sites like you can change this,
Right.
that.
Oh, then you're talking server side.
So, yeah.
Like if you're actually changing your image by uploading an image, then you're talking server side.
Okay.
Yes. Then you're talking server side. That's correct. So that's attaching. Now, the first thing that we did there is we created a new element. And then you modify the content, and then you modify the attributes of that element. Sometimes you might not have to start from scratch, right? If there's an element that's already out there and you want to start from that element and have its attributes and have its values, have its content, you could clone an element and then make changes. So again, keep in mind when we did this, when we created a node from scratch. And then we attached it, and voila, that's done. Well, this is the idea of, you know what, instead of creating it from scratch, let's just go ahead and clone the image, and then maybe we just change the source, and then we attach the clone. Does that make sense? So cloning instead of starting from scratch. Starting from scratch is saying, hey, I've got an empty image, but maybe there's something already that exists that you want to clone instead, and you start with all of its attributes and you start with all of its values. Okay? So I just came back from a short pause, more or less demonstrated that cloning can be viewed almost as a shortcut. And I think it might help at this point to just show the code. Now, here's another event listener. Here's another event listener that calls a function called clone me. So I already created the picture. Now I'm going to clone it. And if I go up to the function clone me, whoop, didn't mean to do that. Here's all I needed to do to clone. I create a new variable. I call it clone. I assign it equal to the element that was created before, which was me. Clone node. Now, inside of clone node, you got a true or false. You put true if the node that you're cloning has children and you want to clone the children. Like if you're cloning a list and that list has a bunch of list items, you would put true in these parentheses, meaning that you want to clone the children as well. But I'm not cloning anything. I'm just cloning with children. I'm just cloning an image. So it's false because there are no children. Then what do? I say document.get_element by ID, add here. I'm using appendChild again, and now I'm adding the clone to the document. Again, I'm keeping the examples pretty basic just to demonstrate how to clone something. And of course, if I first add me, then I click clone, you can see now it clones. And if you want to get silly with it, you can do it a whole bunch of times. Some of this stuff, as we're learning, it becomes almost, well, you see what just happened there? Some of it becomes almost like a trolly, just when you're playing around. We'll get to some of this stuff.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, you hover over some content and it disappears.
Is that what we're learning right now?
That's what's coming up. That's coming up. Okay, let's move on to the next topic because we talked about creating nodes, attaching nodes, cloning nodes. And once you've cloned a node, we've also attached one of those. But right now, you can only add something. If you go back to attaching nodes, you can only append, when you append a child, it adds it to the very end of the sibling list, if you will. It's the last sibling. But we have a little bit more flexibility. For example, in this document, here we're adding the child all the way to the very end. Well, what if I wanted to add the child in the middle of the list somewhere?
Why don't you just change it?
Well, there's no way to do that with appendChild. appendChild, by default, puts the node at the end. Okay? Which is where insert before. Okay? That's where insert before comes into play. And this is a little bit more complex of a method because if you look at the syntax, first you target the parent, similar to what we did before. Then you say insert before, that's your method. And inside the method, you have two arguments, or two, we'll call them arguments, right? The new thing that you're inserting and the existing child node, as far as where you, the existing child node is where you're inserting before, right? So you target a parent. You say, this is my parent. This is the node I want to insert. And this is the child node I want to insert it before. Okay? So let me, right, so can I show it on the diagram? Okay, the parent would be article. The new content would be the figure. That's what you've created with JavaScript. And then the element that you want to insert it before, maybe you want to insert it before figure 4.
So you would put before, but isn't it new? Isn't it new figure 4 existing something?
Well, the new child would be figure.
Oh, okay.
Right? And then the existing child would be maybe fig 4, right? Which one of these? Whichever one you want to pick.
Right.
That's the existing child.
Okay.
Okay? Now, let's look at my demonstration. So if I go down here, here's the next event listener. When you click the input button under the footer with an ID of foot 3, it calls insert before. So that's our function, insert before. Here's insert before. I put a few notes in here to help. So the first thing I did was get the list, which is your parent. Now this example is pretty similar to the book, right? When I get the list, that's a parent. Okay, there's something with an ID of icons. And if I look here, that's our unordered list with an ID of icons. So that's our parent, a variable of list. Now I create my item, and my item is just going to be a list item, an li, using create element, which is what we've learned on the first slide. And then I modify my variable's inner HTML by adding my name. So I give it some content, right? Then I have to target the item to put it in before, right? The existing child. The existing child is a list item. If you remember from yesterday or the previous video, query selector all, right? This is a CSS selector. This is selecting all of the list items under the icons list. right? So we have an unordered list with a class of icons. There's a bunch of LIs in there. And what does this parenthesis 1 do? It selects the second list. Okay? Now we have a parent, which is our list. We insert before the item. This is our new content. And list item is our existing child. Now, let's take a look at the page. This social media list, this is the list that we're targeting. Now, the second icon is this Twitter bird, right? So essentially what I did is I targeted the list as the parent. I created a new list item using JavaScript. And I say, when I click the button, insert that list item before the Twitter bird. If it works. Here's insert before. Once I click it, there it goes. And there's my name. There's my new list item. I can inspect the DOM, and you can see the new LI with my name on it.
What would be the like purchasing for that in like a real world service?
So the question is what would be the purpose? Well, we're inserting content just like we did before, just when we inserted an image. You know, my favorite example is Netflix. You hover over a movie. New content pops up with the description of that movie. Right? Instead of loading a whole new page, this is all dynamic. It's all on the client side. So it doesn't, a new page doesn't have to load, right? And you can target exactly where you want that content to pop up.
So then, but you're just like having it just stay there instead of like.
Right, instead of making it disappear.
Right, okay.
Because making it disappear is next.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Seth?
Couldn't you, the hover thing on Netflix, couldn't that be done completely with HTML, CSS, so you just did the hover display paragraph?
There's a lot of things that you can do in JavaScript that you can do
Like I think
purely in HTML and CSS.
3 added a bunch of like.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And we're still working on vanilla JavaScript. So.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's adding, I mean, this is adding content anywhere you want in your HTML. Keeping in mind when you add content, it pushes things around a little bit, right? So in your HTML and CSS class, you got used to positioning, and positioning was a challenge, right? Well, now you're going to have to think about, okay, what if I introduce this new content? How does it affect my positioning? It can affect it a lot, right? So just keep that in mind as you're adding and removing content. Well, now that you talk about removing nodes, that's what's next. Removing nodes. If you take a look at this example, here's the function, remove node. So you target the parent, and you can remove one of its children. So target a parent node, remove one of its children. If we look at this demonstration, they target a list. I just realized, and it just popped into my head, I had another demonstration. Because this list one was a little bit more complex, I thought, I wonder if I can make this easier. So I have another insert before 2. Sorry to be choppy here. I want to go back to my other insert before. So I did insert before here. I have another function called another one, which is another insert. Insert before. And I tried to simplify it a little bit. So if I look at my function called another one right here, I target, I create an element that's a paragraph, and the paragraph's text content is ha 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 in Spanish. I learned that. Ja 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 ja. Okay, so I create a paragraph in JavaScript. I give it some content. I target the parent, which is something with an ID of banner. If I look at my markup, here's a section with an ID of banner. So that's the parent. Inside that parent, I've got two H1s and a paragraph. So I target before the ID of EG2. Well, EG2, if I look at EG2, I believe that was my second heading. So I'm going to insert my paragraph before EG2, which is going to be in between these two headings. And here is the actual insert, right? I target my parent, which is my variable called parent, insert before. The content I'm inserting is my paragraph, and I'm inserting before my variable called before. Now, one more thing I did is I made this on hover. Instead of on click, if I hover the insert before to button, you can see it continually, you can't even click on it if you try. It's kind of, again, this kind of trolly, because every time you try and hover it, it just adds another paragraph of ha 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 ha. Come at it from a different angle. It's still pretty tough, right? So that's another demonstration I wanted to do of insert before. I think we can skip ahead to the removing node, because we talked about this. You target the parent, remove child, and which child do you remove is the syntax. So here's my remove function. My parent is a div with a class of image. This is a query selector all. So there's a bunch of divs with a class of image, and I target the second one. So it's important to understand I'm selecting all of the divs with the class of image. But in this particular example, I'm just selecting the second one. Then, again, I use a query selector all, and I select all of the images within the div with a class of image, and there must be multiple images. That's why. So let's look at the markup, right? So I need a class of image, and there's going to be multiple images inside of this div. Not it, 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 not it. Div with the class, oh, here it is. Here's my div with the class of image. Here's my images inside of that. So here's my div with the class of image with an image inside. Div with the class of image with an image inside. So I happen to target the second one, which is the picture of this lady here, right? So my parent is the div. My child is the second image inside of that div. And the syntax is here, parent dot remove child, selecting the child. I happen to run this function called remove. Right here. When I hover over the class of person inside of the class of person, which was my div, well, that might not be a div, that might be a section. Either way, there's a div inside of that and the image inside of that. That's when I call remove. So when I mouse over that image, it calls remove, and remove removes the image. So that was, I think my selectors got a little complex there. But in demonstration here, when I mouse over the image, it removes the content. I probably could have made that example a little bit simpler by making my selectors more simple, but I walked through it, and it'll be on the video if you want to review it. Okay, so that's demonstrating how to remove a node. The next concept is how to create a window pop-up. So this is pretty interesting because you've all experienced pop-ups before, and maybe you've wondered how would I go about doing that. With a very simple little bit of JavaScript, you can with the window object, keeping in mind the window object is a global object. So when you call alert, you don't have to call window.alert, you can just say alert, right? All of Windows methods work that way. You don't have to say window dot, you could just say the method name. These are a list of properties, and here are a list of window methods. A lot of these we're going to use. For example, we already have used alert a whole bunch. Window.blur removes focus from a window or tab. Have you ever been to a website that causes a pop-up and the pop-up goes behind your other windows?
Yep. No.
Yep.
That's a blur.
No.
That's a blur. If you have a pop-up that pops up and it goes behind another window, that's a blur. We're going to talk about timeouts and intervals and how those work. Window.open though, that's open. As simple as alert is, open is so simple to cause a pop-up. Window.open. And then inside of the open, here's a bunch of other methods we'll use to set interval and set timeout. We'll definitely use a lot of these functions in this chapter. Now you could say window.open or window.close. And it's as simple as that. Now, you already know how to open up a page using a link, right? You set the target equal to underscore blank, or if you've ever tried this, this works as well. Give it a name. But here's the syntax for window.open. And at its base, it's pretty simple. Window.open URL. Check out how easy that is. Now, if you open a script, think about how easy this is. You open up a script tag, no functions, nothing. In that script tag, you have a window.open to another site. You're going to get a pop-up because that JavaScript will run as soon as that page loads. That script tag will run, and it'll cause a pop-up. Now, keep in mind, if you have a pop-up blocker like most of us do, you're going to have to enable pop-ups. Because your pop-up blocker, the first thing I noticed, my pop-up blocker was blocking this. So I had to enable pop-ups. Let me show you my code. Now, this is a little bit more complex because I made it that way. But essentially, you could call window.open and open up to rankin.edu. Give your window a name. And here on the third argument, you got a bunch of options. Like you could turn toolbars off, menu bars off, no scroll bars, it's not resizable. Now you can program these and I will tell you that some browsers will listen to your JavaScript, other browsers will not. Okay? For example, Chrome, I tested this out. Chrome will listen to the width and the height. It'll set the location to none, so that it'll be up in the right-hand corner. But there will be scroll bars. So let's just check out how this works. Again, this is just a window.open. Slightly more complex.
When you say location, what do you mean?
Location on the screen. Like, is it in the center of the screen? Is it at the bottom? Is it at the top?
So we can say when it opens up like that.
Go in the middle of the screen or go on the right of the screen. You can tell it exactly where to go.
A window?
A window. So here's somewhere in here. Oh yeah. I say if you click this guy, it does a pop-up. That's what I did. So if you click this guy, oh, there goes my pop-up.
That's the. Ooh.
Right? Now, that looks.
If you did a link, it would have. It would
Do you
take
see
to the other
the
page.
URL? Let's see if I can. I can't even change the URL. See that? Here I am typing. I can't change my URL. So those options worked. It's just here we still have a scroll bar. We couldn't get rid of that.
It's still resizable.
It's still resizable. But doesn't this window look different,
Yeah.
right? I mean, compared to any other window. There's no tabs. There's no forwards, backwards, reload. Definitely looks different. I don't have, again, I don't have all my add-ons on this window. And I made it more complex. Check this out. Like here's a simple version of this, right? You don't even have to put it. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to put it at the bottom of my script, not in a function at all. And I'm not even going to assign it equal to a variable because that's for my demonstration later. Like look at how easy this is. What website should we navigate to?
Bing.
Oh my goodness, www.bing.com. Right? So as soon as I open one page, a pop-up for Bing is going to pop up. So I'm opening my home page. There it goes.
What's whack?
Pops up Bing. And
That's
that's a lot easier. Right? I don't even, because it's the global object, and we just do open.
So that did it as soon as it opened.
Yeah.
We lacking. It's not in the function.
I've got 0 Bing rewards. You're right. I don't even know how to earn Bing rewards, nor do I want to know.
I do know.
Yes.
They
Do
say
you, when you copy and paste your final line, like,
So the question was, can I copy and paste my final line?
Yes.
How many times?
just like 30?
No, just do it like 4.
Just do it like 4.
He said 30.
I guess we don't.
I would think.
There it goes.
I would think that like literally something wrong with that.
You have now.
Like, they'll be like,
Now your end users think they have spyware.
Oh man.
All these different sites.
That's what
Send them to some sketchy looking sites. Nothing inappropriate. Just sketchy looking. They definitely would think they have spyware. And it's just a little bit of JavaScript. Now here's the thing. There's definitely security built into this, right? I mean, if you have a pop-up blocker, boom, they're all pops. Right? There's things that you wish you could do, like remove scroll bars, that Chrome just says no. Nope. We understand that. Think about this. The document object model is a W3C standard, but the browser object model is not. When we're working with the window object, we're working in the browser object model. So it's really up to the browser manufacturers what they want to support and what they don't. If Google Chrome says, you know what, I don't care what you say, we're going to have scroll bars, then that's what Google Chrome supports. And you can write the JavaScript to say no scroll bars, It's just not going to listen. It's not a standard, it's a recommendation, but they say that doesn't sound too safe to us. Make sense? The last thing here, when you pop open, what I say, you click this guy, you can also close it with window.close. So window.open opens it, window.close closes it. So if you open a page with JavaScript, you can close that page with JavaScript. Something that I tried is I opened this page just by navigating to it, just by opening it, not with JavaScript, but just like how you would normally, you navigate to a page. I tried closing this very page with JavaScript. It didn't work. So if you open a window with JavaScript, you can close it. But if you open a window using any other method, I didn't have any luck in closing it. Again, I think that's a security feature.
Can you open a local page?
Can you open a local page? Good question. Let's check that out. I believe the answer is yes, but the first thing I need to do is here's my temp page. I'm going to paste it and call it temp2. I'll just 2.htm. And then let's change my script to open up 2.htm, right? So when you click on the button, it opens up 2.htm. There it goes. Now that's really interesting. What?
Is that your male, female one?
Oh, there's a little pop-up. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so it worked, yes. And then if you click close, there it goes. So that's opening and closing a window. Window.close or self.close will do the job. The next concept is pretty neat because right now we're learning how to, okay, when you click on something or when you hover on something or when you type in a text box or when the page loads, you run some JavaScript. You run a function, but the function runs one time. What if you want to run a function every 10 seconds? Or just one time, right? If you want to run a function one time, then you set a timeout. So a timeout is one time, an interval is multiple times. And they'll give you some code here. I'll demonstrate my code. I think it's a little bit simpler. An interval would be running a function multiple times. So every 10 seconds, you run a function. And that's, with this demonstration, will be the last chunk of code that I demonstrate. So here's my timer. Now notice again, I create a global variable so that I can use timer inside of, I think I use it in multiple places. Maybe I don't. But essentially, I create a variable, and I assign that variable equal to, now this is, remember, set interval belongs to window, right? It's window.setInterval. And I tell the set interval, which again, it runs many times. Matter of fact, it runs every 5 seconds. This is milliseconds. So 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So 5,000 milliseconds is 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds, it runs mod. Okay, if I look at what mod does, I got an if-else statement inside of mod, and I've got this variable equal to 1, right? If the color equals 1, I change the background color to a different color. Then I modify the variable, and then I modify color, right? So then 5 seconds later this runs, color will be 2, it'll run this line of code. it changes color back to 1. 5 seconds later, color equals 1 again. It runs this line of code. Then it runs color equal to 2. 5 seconds later, this line of code runs. So all we're doing is changing background colors back and forth continuously
Like a loop.
every 5 seconds. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But it's not a loop, it's just an interval, right? It's just something that continually runs. Kind of, I guess you could say like a loop, yes. Like a loop. There's no loop in there though, other than set interval. I suppose if you go into the set interval function and look at it, there's probably some loop type code.
Can you change that number to 50 and then show it to us?
Change it to 50. You mean spaz it out? Okay, let's look at it with 5 seconds first, and then we'll look at it spazzing out, okay? So here's my timer. You click on the timer. Now 5 seconds seems to take a while, but there it goes. Now that's actually red. On the projector, it looks orange. And then it changes it to blue, and every 5 seconds,
That's not, oh my God.
every 5 seconds is changing the color. And that's set interval. What could you do with this? A lot, right? You can change styles, you could change content, you can make games, you can give, well, and so the question was, can you change this number to 50? Save it. Let's save, refresh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's about as fast as it can go.
I cannot do that.
Okay?
That's beautiful.
Do you see what I did? I stopped it. So once you have a timer set, you can also clear the interval, which is what I did. When you click the H1, it clears the interval. So there's the timer. Stop the timer. This is the last thing on this PowerPoint, right? Here's our last function. All I do, remember I made timer a global variable. Here's timer. I made timer a global variable, so I put timer inside of clear interval, and that stops the mod function from running every 5 seconds or every 0.5. What is that fraction of a second? 0.05 or 0.005, something of that nature. Okay, and so clear interval is how you stop. Now a timer, a set timer and a clear timer work the same way as set interval and clear interval, except for a timer just runs one time. Maybe you, on the page load, you set a timer so that after 10 seconds on the page, it starts doing whatever it wants to do. Okay?
Like, what do you mean? Whatever it wants to do.
Whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to change the content, you want to change the style, if you want the image to slowly start getting bigger every second on the page, whatever it
And
is.
then back to smaller.
And then back to smaller, whatever you want to do. Okay. So that's part 2 of this lecture. We're going to come back on the next video and talk about these last several objects that are a part of the browser object model.